Hi, I'm Brent Armstrong, and this is my 526 Capstone project video. Why did I choose Azusa Pacific University and then carried on with the Digital Teaching and Learning program? Well, I had a history with Azusa. I did undergraduate work there my first 2 years out of high school, way back in 1984, so 29 years ago. After 2 years at Azusa, I decided to transfer. I ended up finishing my bachelor's degree at Baylor University out in Texas, a bachelor's in history. But once I was done with that, needed a job. Didn't really have much of a good plan working, so what I ended up doing is joining the military. I became a teacher for the Navy, teaching advanced electronics and weapons. After 20 years, the Navy decided to retire me. Again, I was kind of right back to where I started. I needed a job, needed to have a new beginning. I found God's favor, and He presented me with the opportunity to be a full-time history teacher at a local Christian high school, Foothills Christian High, here in El Cajon, California. So, even though I was a full-time teacher and didn't need a credential, I decided to take the VA up on their offer, and they paid for schooling. And I attended Azusa Pacific here in San Diego to get my credential. I did that right out of school, taking classes at night while still being a full-time teacher, and got my credential last June, so about a year ago. So once I got my credential, the program allowed me to continue on, finish a master's degree, and this opportunity arose. So I took the professor's recommendations and got into this Master Education, Digital Teaching and Learning. So what have I learned from here? Each class presented a new challenge. We have the basics, starting off with this is a computer, these are the hardware components, this is an iPad, this is how the iPad works, and these are various apps that are available. So it starts out from the very basics, and then it goes in how you can actually use these technologies and programs to better your classroom presentation. So I would learn how to do podcasts. I would learn the difference between a wiki and a Wikipedia. I learned the difference between a podcast and a Comcast, and almost anything else using iMovie or Movie Maker, what the pros and cons were. And I'd develop different programs, I'd develop different applications so I could present these things to my students. 514 class was an eye-opener as far as creating movies, and it got to be pretty fun. 522 kind of wrapped things up. It presented how to develop an entire new unit plan. So that was beneficial. So now that I know that I could do that one, then I can do just about any other ones that comes along. So that's what's important to me about this program. It allowed me and gave me the tools to function. And now I can take that and run with it, continue on smartly, as they say. For my action research project, I took a topic that seemed to be rearing its ugly head in my classroom. That was my students would just not bring their textbooks regularly to class. And so decided to see if I could do something about that. Even though we may not use it every day, it would have been nice if they would bring it in when we did need it, and they would have it ready. The problem I saw that other classes, they would bring in their books all the time. No sweat, no problem. But to my class, they just wouldn't bring in their texts. I decided to use a scientific method and design consistent procedures that would ensure student compliance, that they would just by force of habit bring in their textbooks each day. To start implementing my ideas, I decided to go ahead and brainstorm with the students, see if they had any great ideas that would encourage them to bring in their textbooks. Of course, students being students, teens, high schoolers, everything was what's in it for me. Their ideas came down to reward, early dismissal, candy, food, anything and everything, including extra credit for something that they should have done anyway. I promptly dismissed most all of their suggestions, seeing as they were pretty well self-serving, and decided to use something a little bit more substantial and lasting. So I came up with a 5-step approach to this solution, the most effective being to use more of the textbook in my instruction, so that way the students would feel the need to actually bring it in. The end result graph shows that it was never really fully achieved, that everybody's going to bring in their textbook. It got a little bit better and better throughout the weeks, but the full compliance would never really happen. So of all the steps that I took, I think the most important one to take away would be that I need to increase the use of my text. This would demonstrate to the students that they need to bring it in and there's a purpose for it. For my curriculum portfolio, I've chosen my world history class and the unit on the French Revolution. The unit encompasses 5 weeks and follows a chronological timeline, from the beginnings of the philosophy of the Enlightenment to the rise of the absolute monarchies. And while we pay close attention to the problems associated with the haves and the have-nots, I find that this era to be particularly fascinating because it offers so much for me and the student to think about. Marie Antoinette, King Louis XVI, absolute monarchies with the wealth against the peasants and the bourgeoisie, the people with the absolute poverty. Also, it tracks the revolution and up to the rise of Napoleon. It's truly a pivotal time that has changed the world. The goal is not just to give the student an overview of the French Revolution, but get the student to feel and ask himself a question. What would it be like to live back then? The final project in this unit is for the students to see for themselves how the other half lives. They visit and help feed the homeless in San Diego. Downtown, the Foothills Christian High School helps sponsor Such As I Have Ministries. One of our teachers leads teens and students downtown. They can see for themselves how acts of kindness can transform lives. The students are encouraged to fast for 24 hours and feel what others feel daily. Now they can better answer that question. What would it be like to live back then? The final assessment is not just on the unit of the French Revolution, but on their perception of how the world works. Perhaps if the student can relate to the past, they can act in the present and change the future. For the unit plan itself, the objectives cover a chronological timeline of the French Revolution. Of particular goal is to get the students to understand the times, the events, and why they occurred, and how to relate to people who lived back then. All of the multiple intelligences were used in the unit. Each day and each lesson brought new differentiation to ensure all students could better understand the topics. Of the many technologies used, some favorites included YouTube, using the iPads in class, video filming of the role plays and skits that we did, and of course the social medias of Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. The California content standards shown here were adhered to. I dare the state to come up with a question that my kids could not answer. For the technology standards, we focused on research and information fluency, critical thinking, problem solving, and digital citizenship, or demonstrating personal responsibility for lifelong learning. Our weeks were divided into themes. Week number 1 saw the beginnings of the Revolution. 2 great activities were creating clay models of the Bastille Fortress, and then performing skits reenacting the executions of King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. The students particularly got involved in these reenactments. They designed their own costumes, they came up with their own lines, and it was a competition between 4 separate groups to see who could come up with the most realistic type of skit for executing King Louis and Marie. Week number 2 focused on the music and kinesthetic. intelligences. I ended up stealing my daughter's Wii Dance DVD video, and we taught the students how to waltz, similar to the dancing done in the Palace of Versailles during the time. Students would also use this week to create songs or raps about the revolution. Week number 3 seemed to be a favorite week for the students. It was called Physics Week. First thing we did was look into Google Earth and to see if all roads did indeed lead to Paris, as King Louis XVI said. So they would get online and do some video searching that way. We visit the physics classroom and we use measuring devices to learn about the physics of the time period. Students see how a guillotine works, how far cannons could fire, and how hard it is to actually break through a stone castle. The final capstone project, if you will, is for the class to join with our local homeless ministry. Such as I Have Ministries take youth to downtown San Diego and serve the homeless food, deliver blankets and clothes, and toiletries, as well as to talk to them with a kind and open heart. Students are encouraged to go on a personal fast for 24 hours. This to feel the hunger pangs that the poor of today feel, and how the poor of the French Revolution felt back then. Each of these weeks and unit lessons leads up to a comprehensive formal unit assessment. True and false multiple choice questions are just one part. The main part is the essay portion, where the students get to answer the question, what was it like to live back then during the French Revolution? So, where do I go from here? Well, the race has been run, fought the good fight, ready to put on the cap and gown and do it one more time. For me, it is continue on smartly, do what I do. I love teaching in my high school. It's the greatest of all worlds. 4-day vacations every weekend, as well as being with high schoolers and teaching the subject that I love. My goal, I would love to end up teaching in junior college, now with a master's degree, and in technology, education, and learning, I can be more competitive. I have that background that I can fall upon to qualify me for bigger and better things. A little bit more money wouldn't help as well. But it's continuing on doing what I love to do. I've fallen into the career that I like, and there's no reason why I can't keep going. So maybe someday I'll end up teaching this class as well. It's not out of the realm of impossibilities becoming a college professor. So I wish you well, and I thank you all very much.